Besides Yang Yi, the countenance of all the other three of them had turned ghastly pale upon noticing the snakes charging over. Especially Qing Hong, her figure directly fell weakly by Yang Ye's side. As for Manzi and Xiao He, they weren't any better, and their entire bodies felt weak and didn't even have the strength to flee. If it was at an ordinary time, then with their mental strength, they would definitely not be so terrified even if they were facing a few tens of thousands of snakes. However, after the oppression of the heavy pressure during that period of time from before, their nerves and minds couldn't bear such heavy strain any longer. Moreover, coupled with the snakes that densely covered the surroundings, the three of them had directly accepted their fates and stopped struggling in vain. When the snakes charged over, Yang Yi still maintained a calm mind, and he tried hard to think about what had offended this swarm of snakes. Yang Yi suddenly stood up when the snakes were only over 10 m away from them, and he withdrew the twin-wing python's inner core from behind the clothes at his chest before forcefully tossing it away. At the same time, his wrist spun as his sword appeared in his hand. As he watched the inner core fall into the darkness in the distance, the profound energy within his entire body surged. He wouldn't resign himself to death, yet he was clearly aware that if his guess was wrong, then he would probably die. Fortunately, he was right. When that inner core entered into the darkness in the distance, the snakes that were originally surging towards them had instantly stopped on the spot, and then they surged like tidewater towards the direction the inner core vanished at. At this moment, Yang Yi felt a slight lingering fear in his heart. The scene of that dense swarm of snakes wriggling about was an extremely magnificent sight, and they seemed as if they were boundless. Wave after wave surged towards the inner core, and such a magnificent sight had continued for almost over 2 hours before all of them vanished. Yang Yi instantly heaved a long sigh of relief when he saw all the snakes in the surroundings had vanished. Even with how brave he was still slightly terrified when gazing at such a magnificent sight. Not to mention him, even a king realm expert that could fly would definitely perish when facing the encirclement of so many snakes. Under the circumstances where one's opponent didn't possess absolute strength, then numbers were superior. Yang Yi lowered his head to look at the three of them who had fainted on the ground, and he shook his head. Even though that situation from before was a hopeless situation, their display was truly a bit too horrible. He'd heard that the Sword Sect's outer court exam contained a test on one's mental state, and based on their display, the three of them would absolutely not conform to the requirements. After he woke them up, the three of them shot their gazes towards the surroundings, and when they noticed there weren't any snakes in the surroundings, they instantly sat up and wiped the cold sweat on their foreheads. In the path towards the martial Tao, one's mental state and disposition are especially important. Your behaviors from before were truly too inferior. Yang Yi felt that there was a need to warn them, because no matter what, all of them were companions that had gone through thick and thin. If he was able to allow their mental states to improve, then it would be a good thing. Their faces instantly revealed slight embarrassment when they heard Yang Yi. There was no need for Yang Yi to say anything because they themselves knew that they'd really embarrassed themselves just now. Even though the swarm of snakes was terrifying, as profounder, directly losing their ability to do battle was truly too cowardly. When he noticed their embarrassed expressions, Yang Yi continued, "I'm not ridiculing the three of you. You three must realize that as a profounder, if you don't have the courage to seek survival in a hopeless situation, then how far can you go on your path towards the martial Tao? Just like what happened moments before. That was a hopeless situation, but all of you shouldn't give up. Even if you die, you shouldn't give up. If you don't give up, then you'll still have a trace of hope. But if you give up, then you wouldn't have any chance. Not to mention the path towards the martial Tao, you wouldn't even have your lives any longer." These were words that came from Yang Ye's heart. Since he was young, difficulties had followed closely behind him like cancer. However, he hadn't given up, and no matter what he did, he'd never given up. Even if he was reduced to a labor disciple of the Sword Sect and fell from heaven right to hell, he still didn't give up, and it was precisely this mentality of never giving up that allowed him to survive until now. When they heard Yang Yi, Manzi and Xiao He took a deep breath before they stood up and bowed to Yang Yi. Manzi said in a serious tone, "Thank you. Now I understand why our strengths are so inferior. even though it's related to natural talent and cultivation resources, but it's mostly because of ourselves instead. Our will isn't firm, and we give up as soon as we encounter difficulty. We deserve to be forever unable to stand above others. Manzi was speaking from the heart. Especially when he recalled the scenes of the past, it allowed him to further confirm his own problems. In the past, he and Xiao No, it should be said that numerous people amongst the mercenaries thought that if they were given cultivation resources, then they would absolutely not be weaker than the disciples of sects and elites of the empire. However, when he thought about it now, this way of thinking was truly laughable. Not to mention anyone else, just Yang Yi who stood before him had a cultivation that was lower to his own. Yet Yang Ye's strength and mental state wasn't something he could compare to at all. Qing Hong glanced at Yang Yi, and then she lowered her head. She had similar thoughts as well before this, and that was that if she was a disciple of a sect, then her strength would absolutely not be weaker than Yang Yi. But just moments ago, their respective displays within the hopeless situation from before allowed her to understand the distance between the two of them, and it wasn't just a gap of strength. When he noticed the three of them were slightly dejected, Yang Yi consoled. I'm not trying to discourage you, and I'm just reminding the three of you. What all of you need to do now is to understand your mistakes and face them courageously, not become dejected as you're now. In any case, the three of you are only a little over 20 years old, and you still have a chance to enter the first heaven realm. Manzi laughed bitterly and said, without a fortuitous encounter, we'll probably have no hope to enter the first heaven realm for our entire lifetimes. When he heard this, Yang Yi didn't say anything because some things couldn't be changed by a few words from him. Every single person had their own path in life, and they just had to walk properly on their own path. Meanwhile, Qing Hong looked at Yang Yi and asked, right, why did those snakes act in that way? Yang Yi didn't hesitate to tell them about everything that occurred just now because he was also puzzled about why those snakes would encircle them. When she heard Yang Yi had thrown the inner core away, Qing Hong frowned and asked, You placed the inner core behind your clothes and not within a spatial ring? When they heard Qing Hong, Manzi and Xiao looked at Yang Yi as well. Even though he felt something was wrong, Yang Yi still nodded under their gaze. When they saw Yang Yi nod, the three of them instantly revealed strange expressions. Qing Hong slapped her forehead and rolled her eyes at Yang Yi before she said, Little brother, do you know how extremely attractive inner cores are to dark beasts? Inner cores of their own kind are capable of allowing them to advance in cultivation. In the beginning, I thought you'd placed the inner core into a spatial ring, but I never expected that you placed it behind your clothes. When he heard this, Yang Yi habitually rubbed his nose and glanced at the three of them before he said in a light voice, So, in this way, it was I who drew those snakes over. The three of them nodded forcefully. Yang Yi was slightly embarrassed as it was his own fault in the end. When he thought up to here, Yang Yi hurriedly apologized because no matter what, it was his mistake that caused them to almost be eaten by those snakes. So he had to apologize. When they heard Yang Yi apologize, the three of them felt slightly embarrassed instead. Even though it was Yang Ye's mistake, he'd saved their lives in the end. Moreover, it was unintentional this time. So, now that Yang Yi had apologized, the depressed feelings in their hearts had instantly vanished. Once the ill feelings between them were resolved, they started chatting freely once more. This time, the three of them taught Yang Yi about all the experiences they possessed as mercenaries. For example, what he shouldn't do and what he had to do. Under their guidance, Yang Yi didn't just obtain great gains, he even felt extremely fortunate to have become companions with them. Tempering himself required battles of life and death and ceaseless breakthroughs while in danger. This was Yang Ye's original way of thinking, and it wasn't wrong. However, only now did Yang Yi realize that this matter wasn't as simple as he'd imagined. To put it in a simpler manner, if one didn't sprinkle Beast King droppings before resting in the Snake Forest, then even if it was a first Heaven Realm expert that was resting here, the consequences would still be horrible. Because once one entered into battle within the pitch-black Snake Forest, the battle would absolutely draw over a swarm of countless snakes. Under such circumstances, even a first Heaven Realm would definitely perish. Moreover, there were numerous methods of survival in the Grand Myriad Mountains, and these methods had been summarized through the lives of countless mercenaries. Yang Yi committed all of these methods to memory in a serious manner because even though he'd come to temper himself, he didn't want to court death for no reason. It was fine to have a battle with a king of snakes, but if he had to fight a few tens of thousands of snakes, then he wasn't gaining experience and tempering but courting death instead. After the trouble caused by that swarm of snakes, all of them didn't rest and chatted until daybreak instead. After dawn arrived, all of them made slight preparations before continuing on their way. After walking for around 6 hours of time, the illumination within the forest grew brighter and brighter. Perhaps it was because of that inner core from last night, but they weren't attacked by any of the venomous snakes within Snake Forest. However, even if it was like that, Yang Yi hadn't let his guard down because he knew that caution was paramount, and it was best to not be careless in the Grand Myriad Mountains. When they walked out of Snake Forest, Manzi and the others immediately heaved sighs of relief. The horrifying scene from last night had caused them to feel deep fear towards Snake Forest, and they could finally heave sighs of relief when they walked out of it now. Swish! Right at this moment, the sound of air being torn apart resounded. Right when this sound had just arisen, Yang Yi, who was originally by Qinghong's side, frowned, and at the same time, his figure vanished on the spot and appeared before Manzi before he smashed his fist out. Bang! An ink-black-colored iron arrow shattered into countless pieces. As they gazed at the iron arrow that had shattered into countless pieces, all four of their expressions had changed greatly. Especially Manzi, at the same time that he was furious in his heart, he felt deep fear because if it wasn't for Yang Yi, then he would be heavily injured even if he was able to survive it. Manzi and the others' reaction wasn't slow at all, and they swiftly withdrew their weapons before gazing vigilantly towards the surroundings. On the other hand, Yang Ye's expression was gloomy. Even though he'd heard from Manzi and the others last night that mercenaries frequently robbed and killed others, he'd ever expected that it would happen to him so quickly. Clap, clap. Along with the sound of clapping, a middle-aged and bald man leaped down from an enormous tree over 30 m away. There were another 3 men and 1 woman by his side. The woman held an inky green-colored longbow in her hand, and she was the only archer. Obviously, that black iron arrow from before had been shot by this woman. Of course, the most surprising member amongst the 5 of them was that man on the right of that woman. That man was none other than Xiao Yuan, who'd abandoned his companions yesterday. The expressions of Manzi and the others became extremely heavy when they saw these people make an appearance. Obviously, they recognized this mercenary group. As she watched the 5 of them walk over, Qinghong walked over to Yang Ye's side and said in a low voice, "They're the Wolfhead mercenary group, and they frequently attack and plunder weak mercenary groups in Grand Myriad Mountains. Their leader is called Baldi Chong, and he's a peak 9th rank mortal realm expert who's said to be halfway into the first heaven realm. The slightly chubby men at his side was a pair of brothers, and they were called Big Bear and Small Bear. Both of them are 9th rank mortal realm experts as well, and they're slightly stronger than Xiao Hei and me. As for that woman, she's Hong Yi, and she's a peak 9th rank mortal realm expert as well. Moreover, her skill in archery is much better than my own." When she saw Xiao Yuan, Qinghong knew that they'd come with ill intent and would absolutely not let even one of them go. So, Qinghong hurriedly gave Yang Yi information about them because only Yang Yi could go against Baldi Chong. Yang Yi frowned when he heard Qinghong, and he silently calculated the difference in strength between their groups. After calculating for a while, Yang Ye's brows knit together even more tightly because he noticed that they utterly had no choice of winning under ordinary circumstances. That man called Baldi Chong who led the group wasn't inferior to him in strength at all, whereas the strengths of those others by Baldi Chong's side surpassed Manzi and the others. Thus, so long as Baldi Chong kept him busy, then under the circumstances that they fought 3 against 4, it wouldn't be long before Manzi and the others would definitely be defeated. If he didn't fight, then he was confident in his ability to escape. However, Qinghong and the others would definitely be unable to flee, and if they were unable to flee, then the consequences they faced were obvious. So, at this moment, Yang Yi was in a slight dilemma. Right when Yang Yi was thinking about how he should deal with this situation, the bald man and the others had arrived 10 m away from Yang Ye's group. The bald man sized Manzi and the others up, and his gaze lingered on Qinghong for a while before he looked at Yang Yi and said, Good reaction and good strength. Brother, which sect are you from? He isn't from any sect. Meanwhile, Xiao Yuan stood out and gazed at Yang Yi as he said with disdain. He's someone that cleans up the battlefield. Brother Chong, ignore him and deal with all of them. That twin-wing python's inner core and skin are definitely in their possession. Actually, he didn't really want to obtain that inner core and skin, and he wanted to kill Yang Yi and the others instead. After he fled yesterday, he'd originally intended to return in order to bury their bodies and plunder their possession. However, when he returned to the battlefield, the twin-wing python, Manzi, and the others had all vanished. When he noticed the traces of blood on the ground, he knew that the four of them had definitely been assisted by someone. At that time, he was truly in panic. He knew that if Manzi and the others returned alive, then his reputation would be doomed. In the future, not to mention that he wouldn't be able to eat from this rice bowl any longer, other professions would probably be unable to tolerate him as well. Because no profession desired a companion that abandoned their companions in battle. You bastard! When they heard Xiao Yuan, Manzi and the others were utterly exasperated. Manzi pointed his saber at Xiao Yuan and said furiously, Xiao Yuan, you piece of trash that abandons his companions in battle. You abandoned us and fled for your life yesterday. Yet now you bring others to look for trouble with us. You scum! You're truly the shame of the mercenary world. When he heard Manzi, Xiao Yuan's expression was slightly unsightly. Originally, he'd advised Baldi Chong and the others to directly make a move against Manzi and the others, and Hong Yi had launched an attack. However, he'd never expected that the arrow which was guaranteed to land a killing blow would actually be blocked. Moreover, after Baldi Chong saw Yang Yi block that arrow, Baldi Chong actually didn't continue attacking. So, Manzi had the chance to curse at him now, and it filled him with hatred. When they heard Manzi, the gazes of all the members of the Wolfhead mercenary group towards Xiao Yuan had become disdainful. Even though their reputation in the mercenary world wasn't that great, they'd never abandoned their companions, whereas this person before them had abandoned his companions in battle, and they similarly looked down upon such a person. Baldi Chong glanced coldly at Xiao Yuan. He looked down upon such people as well, and if Xiao Yuan didn't possess an older brother at the First Heaven Realm, then Baldi Chong would swing his palm over at Xiao Yuan. However, when he thought about Xiao Yuan's older brother, Baldi Chong forcefully suppressed the displeasure in his heart. He directly overlooked Yang Yi and looked at Manzi before he said in a deep voice, "What's with all the nonsense? Hand over the twin-wing python's inner core and skin. Leave that little girl behind as well, and the three of you can fuck off. Brother Chong, you can't let them go." Meanwhile, Xiao Yuan was slightly anxious. However, when he noticed Baldi Chong's icy cold gaze, he hurriedly shut his mouth, and then he hesitated for a moment before he gritted his teeth and said, "If Brother Chong can deal with them, then I'm willing to borrow Big Brother's low-grade profound rank technique for Brother Chong to have a look." Baldi Chong was slightly moved when he heard this because even he hadn't seen a low-grade profound rank technique in his lifetime. After hesitating for a moment, he looked at Yang Yi and the others before a wisp of a cold glow flashed in his eyes, and he said, "Since all of you are unwilling to do as I said, then don't blame me for showing no mercy. Attack!" As soon as he finished speaking, he flipped his wrist, and a large saber appeared in his hand. After that, his figure flashed, and his saber chopped down at Manzi, who was in the lead. At this moment, the strength of their mercenary group was revealed. At the instant Baldi Chong made a move, the two men and a woman around him had found their own opponents with extreme tacit understanding amongst each other. Especially that woman. She was the first to release an arrow towards Qing Hong, who was similarly an archer. On the other hand, Manzi and the others hadn't reacted to this sudden change of events at all. Especially Qing Hong. She'd only returned to her senses when the iron arrow had arrived before her, and then she dodged to the side. However, she'd already lost the initiative, causing her to suffer successive shots from Hong Yi. Right when Baldi Chong charged at Manzi, Yang Yi, who originally stood silently by Manzi's side, had moved. A sword that was suffused with a light golden glow had suddenly appeared in his hand, and then it slashed down like a bolt of lightning towards Baldi Chong. It was so swift that it shocked everyone present in the surroundings. Especially Baldy Chong, who was the target of that bolt of lightning. He was even horrified. Never had he imagined that the originally inconspicuous Yang Yi would actually possess such strength and speed. Earlier, when Yang Yi had blasted that arrow into pieces with a single punch, he'd indeed been slightly surprised. However, when he noticed Yang Yi's age and head what Xiao Yuan had said, he'd completely disregarded Yang Yi. He felt that it was definitely Hong Yi who hadn't utilized her full strength earlier. And even if Yang Yi didn't make a move, that fellow called Man Zi would be able to avoid it. However, at this moment, he knew that this was of thinking was mistaken. Suddenly, Baldy Chong withdrew his saber and utilized it to block before him. Clang! The sword in Yang Ye's hand that was covered in a golden glow struck on Baldy Chong's saber, and the saber instantly shattered into pieces. Whereas, Yang Ye's sword didn't lose any momentum and directly penetrated through Baldy Chong's stomach. What formidable strength! Baldy Chong wasn't able to finish speaking before his body was directly chopped into two, and his internal organs and blood sprayed all over the ground. Yang Yi paid no further attention to Baldy Chong that had been split into two, and he didn't slow down at all before arriving before Big Bear and Small Bear that were still stunned. Under Xiao Yuan's astounded gaze, his sword carried a string of golden afterimages as it flashed past Big Bear's neck, and then a head fell to the ground. Yang Ye's speed didn't reduce at all as he arrived before Small Bear next. After Baldy Chong and Big Bear had died, Small Bear had finally recovered from his shock, and he was astounded in his heart as he raised his saber instinctively to block Yang Ye's attack. However, just like what happened to Baldy Chong earlier, his saber had instantly shattered when the sword and saber collided, and then another head fell to the ground. In the blink of an eye, Yang Yi had dealt with 3 9th-rank Mortal Realm experts, and this time Yang Yi didn't continue attacking, because only Xiao Yuan remained amongst his opponents. When he made a move to kill Baldy Chong, that woman called Hong Yi had put her bow away before turning around and entering the dense forest, and she'd fled so swiftly that it surprised him. As they gazed at the 3 corpses on the ground, Man Zi and the others were utterly stunned on the spot. My God! They were at the peak of the 9th rank of the mortal realm. However, they didn't even have the strength to resist before Yang Ye's sword? Had he concealed his strength before this? Is Yang Yi a first heaven realm expert? A string of questions ceaselessly flashed through Man Zi and the others' minds. Yang Yi wasn't a first heaven realm expert. That was something that was beyond all doubt. The reason he'd suddenly become strong was that Baldy Chong had walked over to him, and he'd secretly slapped on a high-grade strength talisman on himself during this time. Under the boost from the high-grade strength talisman and his golden profound energy, his strength had instantly risen by countless times. Moreover, Baldy Chong and the others had underestimated him, and it allowed him to launch a surprise attack successfully. Otherwise, with his normal strength, it ought to be possible to defeat Baldy Chong, yet it was absolutely impossible to instantly annihilate Baldy Chong. Yang Yi casually swung his sword before gazing at Xiao Yuan, who had a ghastly pale countenance and was trembling slightly. Right when he intended to deal with this piece of trash, Xiao Yuan suddenly said, Yang Yi, you can't kill me. My big brother is a first heaven realm expert. If you kill me, then he'll definitely not let you go. Idiot! You're still trying to threaten me at a time like this? Yang Yi cursed in his heart. With a swift charge, his sword left behind a string of afterimages as it arrived before Xiao Yuan. Xiao Yuan was astounded in his heart, and he raised the sword in his hand to block instinctively. Clang! The Xiao Yuan sword broke into 2 before Yang Ye's sword pierced through his chest. After he put his sword away, Yang Yi turned around and looked towards Snake Forest before he said in an indifferent tone, Could it be that you intend to play the part of the Oriole? When they heard Yang Yi, Man Zi and the others were shocked in their hearts. There are more people in the surroundings. The 3 of them suppressed the shock in their hearts and walked over to Yang Ye's side while their faces were covered in vigilant expression. What a formidable divine sense! After a short moment of deathly silence, along with this voice, 3 figures suddenly leaped out from within Snake Forest. These 3 figures were extremely swift, and they closed a distance of over 100 m in a few breaths of time to arrive 9 m before Yang Yi. It was 2 men and 1 woman. The men were handsome while the woman was beautiful, and all of them were around 17 or 18 years of age. All of them wore white and plain-fitting robes, and a tiny silver-colored crescent was embroidered on their left chest. Even though they were young, Yang Ye's expression was extremely solemn, because even though they hadn't attained the first heaven realm, their strengths were definitely much stronger than Baldichong, whom he'd just killed a few moments ago. The reason he made such an inference was that their speeds were truly too swift, and it was utterly not something ordinary mercenaries could possess. The Bright Moon Sect. When she saw the silver crescent on their chests, Qing Hong exclaimed with surprise. Obviously, she was warning Yang Yi. When he heard Qing Hong, Yang Yi swiftly recalled everything he knew about the Bright Moon Sect. Besides a colossus like the Grand Qin Empire, there were 6 more extraordinary powers in the Southern Territory. These 6 extraordinary powers were separated into 1 school, 2 palaces, and 3 sections. The single school amongst them was the strongest amongst the 6 extraordinary powers, the Origin School. The 2 palaces were respectively Snow Palace and Flower Palace. As for the 3 sects, it was the Ghost Sect, Bright Moon Sect, and Sword Sect. Of course, these were merely the powers that existed on the surface. The Southern Territory was extremely huge, and there were countless hidden clans and small sects. However, Yang Yi didn't know anything about those hidden powers. When they heard Qing Hong, a man that looked slightly older amongst the 3 disciples from Bright Moon Sect took a step forward, and he nodded to Yang Ye's group before he said, "I'm Bright Moon Sect's outer court disciple, Ming Hao. These 2 by my side are my junior brother Ming Xiu and junior sister Ming Yu. Earlier, we just left Snake Forest when we noticed you in battle with others, and for the sake of avoiding any suspicion, the 3 of us didn't show ourselves. However, I never expected that your divine sense would be so formidable, and you actually noticed the 3 of us." When they saw these disciples from a sect act so courteously, Manzi and the others were slightly not used to it. After all these disciples from sects were filled with arrogance when they met mercenaries in the past, and they looked at mercenaries as if those mercenaries were insignificant ants. Of course, the 3 of them knew that these disciples from Bright Moon Sect were so courteous because of Yang Yi. The strong were respected in the Southern Territory. Earlier, Ming Hao and the others were extremely shocked when they watched Yang Yi fight from the shadows. It wasn't that they hadn't seen such a swift sword in the past, yet a swift sword that carried such formidable strength was rare, especially because Yang Yi had even noticed them, and this caused them to feel even more shocked. When he saw them acting so courteously, Yang Yi didn't give them the cold shoulder. He nodded lightly and said, "I'm Yang Yi, an independent cultivator, and these few people by my side are my companions." When they heard Yang Yi, Ming Hao and the others were slightly surprised. They'd originally thought that Yang Yi was a disciple of the Sword Sect, but they'd never expected that Yang Yi was actually an independent cultivator. However, this wasn't important to them, and all that mattered was Yang Ye's strength. "I wonder if Brother Yang is interested in training yourself with us?" Ming Hao smiled as he invited. No matter if Yang Yi was an independent cultivator or a disciple of a sect, possessing such strength at such an age was sufficient for them to treat him as an equal. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment, and then he shook his head lightly before he said, "I'm sorry. I still have some matters to attend to." Yang Yi had left the sect to place himself in life and death battles, and he possessed huge secrets. So, he truly wasn't willing to allow others to know about it. Ming Hao wasn't infuriated by Yang Ye's refusal because he didn't carry much hope in the first place. He immediately said with a smile, "Since it's like that, then we'll train with Brother Yang if we have a chance in the future. We'll be taking our leave first." As soon as he finished speaking, their figures flashed and vanished into the distance. Yang Yi was truly a bit surprised by their attitudes. As far as he was concerned, disciples of sects ought to be arrogant, domineering, and haughty people. However, those 3 people from Bright Moon Sect didn't show any signs of this at all, and they didn't even show the slightest bit of arrogance. This felt slightly unexpected to him. Actually, it was still because Yang Yi was too inexperienced. There were numerous arrogant and domineering disciples from sects, yet they were mostly brainless. Those that were able to become disciples of sects mostly possessed good natural talents and disposition. Moreover, most of them were extremely intelligent, and they deeply understood that instead of adding another enemy to the list, it was better to have another friend instead. Brother Yang, what should we do with them? Meanwhile, Manzi glanced at the corpses in the surroundings and asked. Yang Yi glanced at them as well before he said with a smile, "We definitely have to gather their belongings first." Manzi and the others instantly started laughing when they heard this. After some brief searching, Yang Yi obtained a few valuable things. They were respectively a small-scale spatial ring, a mid-grade yellow rank saber, 2 low-grade yellow rank daggers, and over 10,000 gold coins. However, Yang Yi didn't attach much importance to these things. It couldn't be helped. The requirements of he who was already a grade 1 talisman master had become higher because of this accomplishment. As he looked at the spatial ring in his hand, Yang Yi was slightly disappointed. Because compared to the spatial ring he possessed, it was too much more inferior, but it was better than nothing. After he wore the spatial ring, Yang Yi glanced at the 3 yellow rank weapons within it before glancing at Manzi and the others. He hesitated for a moment before his wrist flipped, and the 3 weapons appeared in his hand. He passed the weapons in his hand to Manzi and the others before he said, "These weapons are useless to me, so all of you can have them." Manzi was first stunned, and then he hurriedly shook his hand and said, "Brother Yang has saved our lives on more than one occasion, and those 3 people were killed by you. We didn't contribute at all, so how could we take that from you?" Qing Hong said from the side as well, "Keep those things. Even though we're really tempted, we have our own principles, and if we took those things from you, then we would look down on ourselves." Yang Yi smiled and said, "I'm not giving them to all of you for free. I heard all of you say last night that besides hunting and killing dark beasts, mercenaries are for hire as well, right?" He was most worried about his younger sister and mother now. Even though Elder Chen had warned the Lu clan, Elder Chen couldn't be at South Peace City all the time after all. If the Lu clan played tricks in order to deal with his younger sister and mother, then they would definitely be in danger. So, he intended to hire these 3 people before him to protect his younger sister and mother in South Peace City, and he'd had this thought since last night. Manzi nodded and said, "Besides hunting and killing dark beasts, we also accept some work related to being bodyguards or helping others to transport goods." "Brother Yang, you mean you intend to hire us?" Yang Yi glanced at Xiao Yuan's corpse on the ground and said, "Xiao Yuan was killed by me. However, if all of you return to Green Hornet City, then his older brother would definitely not let all of you go. If you're willing, then I want all of you to protect my younger sister and mother at South Peace City. As for the time period, we'll make it half a year. What do you think?" The 3 of them were moved when they heard this. Just as Yang Yi had said, once Xiao Yuan died, they would definitely be in danger if they returned to Green Hornet City. Even though the laws were strict in Grand Qin Empire and Xiao Yuan's older brother probably wouldn't dare to make a move against them while they were within Green Horny City, what about outside the city? Moreover, they were unable to continue hunting and killing dark beasts now because there were only 3 of them after all. When they thought up to here, Manzi glanced at Qing Hong and Xiao He, and when he saw them nod, he immediately said, "Brother Yang, we're willing to accept your request." When he heard them agree, Yang Yi passed the 3 weapons in his hand to them, and then he withdrew 10,000 gold coins and passed it to them as well. When he noticed Manzi intended to refuse the gold coins, he said immediately, "Not all of these gold coins are for the 3 of you. 5,000 gold coins are your compensation, and I need you to pass the other 5,000 to my younger sister and mother." When he heard this, Manzi hesitated for a moment before he nodded. 3 yellow rank weapons were already worth no less than 40 or 50,000 gold coins. Coupled with these 5,000 gold coins and their own savings, it was more than enough for them to gain a foothold in South Peace City. Yang Yi continued once Manzi took the gold coins. "After all of you head to South Peace City, let big sister Qing Hong contact my younger sister and mother. Manzi and Xiao He, both of you shouldn't show yourselves, and it's sufficient if the 2 of you hide in the shadows. If danger that the 3 of you are unable to resolve appears, then write a letter to me in the Sword Sect, and I'll rush over as quickly as I can." Manzi said with a smile, Don't worry, Brother Yang. We've done a great deal of work related to protection. If danger that we're unable to resist really appears, we still have some methods to deal with it. In short, so long as it isn't a first heaven realm expert, we'll definitely be able to guarantee the safety of Brother Yang's family. Good. Yang Yi nodded, and then he glanced at Qing Hong, who stood by his side. When they saw Yang Yi glance at Qing Hong, Manzi and Xiao He acted extremely sensibly and left first, whereas Qing Hong originally intended to follow them as well, but she was stopped by Yang Yi. As he gazed at this woman before him that possessed a hot and sexy figure, Yang Yi said in a light voice, "Big Sister Qing Hong, you seem to have been intentionally maintaining your distance from me since last night?" Since last night, Qing Hong's attitude towards him had changed, and she seemed to be intentionally maintaining her distance from him. He knew that perhaps it was because of his strength. But no matter what, he'd taken Qing Hong to be his friend, and he didn't wish for this friendship to vanish just like this. When she heard Yang Yi, Qing Hong's lips moved, and she wanted to deny it. However, when she noticed Yang Yi's serious expression, she didn't give an excuse in the end and just sighed lightly. It was undeniable that she had a good impression of Yang Yi, and she hoped to take Yang Yi as her friend. However, Yang Yi was a disciple of a sect, and a very promising one at that. Moreover, it was very difficult for there to be any friendship between mercenaries and disciples of sects, and it was none other than because they were people of different status. If it was any other mercenary, that person would definitely feel extremely excited from being able to become friends with a disciple of a sect. However, she didn't think like this because this sort of friendship was mostly done out of pity. When he saw Qing Hong remain silent, Yang Yi continued, "Big Sister Qing Hong, I don't know why you've been intentionally keeping your distance from me. However, I want to tell you that I've really taken you to be my friend." "Why?" asked Qing Hong. "I'm only an ordinary mercenary," Yang Yi said with a smile. "I treat others how they treat me. When we entered Snake Forest and while I was hiding my strength, you didn't look down upon me or keep your distance from me as the others had. Conversely, you protected and cared for me at all times. From that moment onwards, I'd taken you to be my friend. If I knew you were so strong, then I wouldn't have poked my nose into your business." Qing Hong rolled her eyes at Yang Yi while she revealed a smile, because she was able to sense that Yang Yi had spoken sincerely. Yang Yi smiled and said with a serious expression, "Big Sister Qing Hong, I think that friendship isn't something that requires strength, money, or other things. So, some of your thoughts are really bad." Qing Hong wanted to refute him, yet her face suddenly turned red, because when she heard Yang Yi say, "some of your thoughts," it made her think of something. She'd intentionally kept her distance from Yang Yi not because she was unable to become friends with him, but because, when she thought of some things, her face turned even redder. When he noticed Qing Hong's face suddenly become red, Yang Yi was slightly baffled. "I didn't say anything that exceeded what was proper. Why has this bold and straightforward woman's face turned red?" When she noticed Yang Yi staring at her, Qing Hong suppressed the embarrassing thoughts in her heart before glaring fiercely at Yang Yi. And she said, "What are you looking at?" Wow. Yang Yi was completely speechless. He really wanted to say that she was incomprehensible, yet he restrained himself in the end. Presently, Qing Hong seemed to have stopped intentionally keeping her distance from him. So, if he were to say that to her, then he would probably be unable to avoid being cursed at. With a flip of his wrist, a strength talisman appeared in Yang Ye's hand, and he passed it to Qing Hong before he said, "Big Sister Qing Hong, this is for you. I'll see you next time." As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't stay here any longer and flashed towards the distance. As she watched Yang Ye's figure vanish, Qing Hong said to herself, "How embarrassing. He's only 16 or 17 years old. How could I possibly have had such thoughts?" When she noticed the talisman with a golden flame on it, Qing Hong's figure instantly froze, and her hands couldn't help but tremble. After a long time, Qing Hong hurriedly placed that talisman behind the clothes at her chest, and then she raised her head to gaze at where Yang Yi had vanished into the distance. She seemed to be dazed as she muttered in a low voice, "A high-grade strength talisman. How could this be possible?" Yang Yi dashed madly all along the way, and he ceaselessly flashed amidst the thick forest like a nimble monkey. During this period of time, he'd encountered some unknown dark beasts. However, he didn't make a move against them because the grades of those dark beasts were too low, and he intended to head to Nether Wolf Gorge to search for those formidable nether wolves. After dashing madly for a few hours, Yang Yi finally stopped, and then he leaped up a large tree at the side before staring towards the distance. In the distance, the mountain range towered into the clouds and continued without end. It was impossible for him to see the end of it. As he gazed at the boundless mountain range, Xianxia's expression was heavy as he said in a low voice, "According to legend, there's an enormous dark beast empire at the central area of the Grand Myriad Mountains. I wonder if it's true. If I have the chance in the future, I definitely must have a look." When he spoke up to hear, he shook his head and said with self-ridicule, "If I'm unable to become an outer court disciple 20+ days from now, and if I'm unable to defeat Lu Qingyu 3 months from now, then I wouldn't even have my life, let alone being able to have a look at the Dark Beast Empire." Yang Yi restrained his thoughts and withdrew a worn-out map from his pocket. Manzi's group had given him this map last night, and it was a map of some areas at the border of the Grand Myriad Mountains. Moreover, some dangerous areas had been indicated on the map by Manzi and the others. After sweeping the map with his gaze, Yang Ye's gaze descended onto Nether Wolf Gorge in the end. After he memorized the way to Nether Wolf Gorge, Yang Yi put the map away and was about to get down from the tree. Right at this moment, Yang Ye's figure that had already leaned forward instantly stiffened on the spot, and his gaze swiftly shot towards the distance. A violet shadow suddenly flashed out from the dense forest 300 m away. The violet shadow was extremely swift. No, it should be said to be strange, because the violet shadow was flickering, and it moved around 100 m in distance with every flicker. As he gazed at this strange scene, Yang Ye's scalp felt slightly numb, and he hurriedly held his breath and didn't dare make any movements. The violet shadow traversed a distance of 300 m in the time of 2 breaths and arrived where Yang Yi was. Fortunately, the violet shadow didn't stop, and it flashed past him. Right when Yang Yi heaved a sigh of relief, the violet shadow that was already over 30 m behind him had suddenly stopped moving, and then it flashed before directly appearing in front of Yang Yi. Yang Ye's body instantly froze. As he gazed at this little thing that appeared before him, Yang Yi didn't dare move at all. He was deeply afraid of annoying this little thing and causing it to annihilate him. It was a mink that had suddenly appeared in front of him, and it was extremely cute. It was completely violet in color, had a slender and long figure, short limbs, long ears, a round head, and its little tail swayed behind it. Moreover, a gorgeous blood-red lotus mark resided on its forehead. The violet mink stopped in midair while its lively eyes gazed at Yang Yi, and it blinked from time to time. It was extremely cute. However, under the gaze of its pair of lively and cute eyes, Yang Yi didn't even dare breathe heavily, because this violet mink's strange speed had truly terrified Yang Yi, and it was a speed that even experts at the King Realm were unable to attain. After a short moment, the violet mink's brows knit together like a human, and then it took 2 steps closer to Yang Yi. Its tiny nose sniffed Yang Ye's body, and then it seemed to have noticed something good, causing the little fellow's large eyes to instantly light up. Even if Yang Yi didn't know the language of beasts, he was able to sense that this little fellow before him was happy, because the little fellow's expression at this moment was exactly similar to his expression that day when he noticed he could become a profounder. The violet mink seemed to have noticed something good in Yang Ye's possession, and its nose sniffed without end while its really round face revealed an intoxicated expression. Right when Yang Yi was about to flee, the violet mink before him suddenly transformed into a wisp of violet light and entered his chest. And this sudden action of the violet mink caused Yang Ye's mind to instantly go blank. After a short while, Yang Yi hurriedly checked his body, and when he noticed the situation within his body, Yang Yi muttered as if he'd lost his soul. How could this be possible? How could this be possible? Yes, that extremely cute little fellow had entered into his body, or more precisely, it had entered the tiny vortex dantian within his body. Earlier, when he immersed his mind into his body, He noticed that the violet mink was sizing up the tiny vortex dantian within his body, and its tiny face was first covered in excitement, then bewilderment before finally revealing excitement again after a short moment. The violet mink seemed to be extremely excited, and it flickered endlessly within his vortex dantian like a mercenary that had found buried treasure. Right at this moment, Xianxia suddenly opened his eyes before looking once more towards the distance. A black figure flashed out from the thick forest in the distance, and when he saw this black figure, Xianxia gulped while his mind went blank, because this black figure was flying in the air, and it was flying without relying on any external forces. Xianxia didn't know what sort of cultivation realm was required in order to fly without relying on external forces. In any case, experts of the king realm and the spirit realm which was above the king realm were unable to accomplish this, whereas experts above the spirit realm were at the exalt realm. The black figure was extremely swift, and it instantly arrived by Xianxia's side. The black figure was completely pitch black, and his entire body was coiled with black energy. Moreover, the countless strands of black energy that roamed around him seemed like numerous venomous snakes that were prepared to swallow their enemies. The black figure didn't stop, and it flashed towards the distance. On the other hand, Xianxia's countenance was ghastly pale at this moment. It was because the black figure had glanced at him, and it was precisely this glance that caused him to feel as if he'd fallen into hell. A feeling of terror instantly enveloped his entire body, and it caused him to be unable to arouse the slightest intention to resist. No, being unable to even bear a single glance from the black figure caused a feeling of humiliation to arise from the bottom of Xianxia's heart, and he roared in a low voice before forcefully raising his head to look at where the black figure vanished. He had a firm expression as he said, "I would rather die than fear. The sword of the disciples of the sword sect would rather break than bend, and the disciples of the sword sect would rather die than be humiliated." These words were something the founding ancestor of the sword sect had said, and Xianxia had committed it to memory. As soon as he finished speaking, the feeling of terror at the bottom of Xianxia's heart instantly vanished. At the same time, the sword in his hand started to tremble violently. It let out a clear and resounding sword howl before a clang resounded, and the sword transformed into countless pieces. On the other hand, Xianxia's eyes were slightly closed at this moment. After he finished speaking those words just now, he'd entered into a strange and profound state. Xianxia didn't know that when he entered into this state, it wasn't just his sword that had shattered. Even the trees in his surroundings rustled as if something invisible was moving. If the 7 peak masters of the sword sect or the sword sect's master were here, they would know what sort of state Xianxia was in. This was a state that countless people within the sword sect dreamed of because this was a state of comprehension, and it would allow one to comprehend the sword intent that no one within the sword sect had comprehended for a few hundreds of years. Swish! Right when Xianxia entered into this state, the sound of wind being torn apart resounded. The black-clothed figure that had originally vanished into the distance had suddenly turned around, and when he sensed that terrifying aura, Xianxia immediately abandoned this state and returned to his senses. Right when he returned to his senses, that black-clothed figure from before had appeared in front of him like a ghost. Xianxia cursed the entire family of this black figure who was standing before him. Even though he didn't understand what that state was, it was undoubtedly beneficial to him. However, it was precisely this fellow that seemed like neither a man nor ghost that had caused him to withdraw from that state. He truly wished to smash his fist towards this fellow. They were less than 2 meters away from each other, yet Xianxia was unable to see the black-clothed person's appearance, because the black-clothed person was surrounded by countless strands of black energy that emanated a terrifying aura, and the black-clothed person seemed to be extremely strange while enveloped by the black energy. After meeting the black-clothed person's gaze for less than a breath of time, Xianxia immediately revealed a terrified expression while he trembled in a seemingly nervous manner. It was as if he was a mouse that had encountered a cat. "Did you see a violet shadow?" The black-clothed person spoke. His voice was slightly hoarse, and it was slightly displeasing to the ear and seemed like something was stuck in his throat. When he heard the black-clothed man, Xianxia's body trembled even more violently, and his lips shivered as if he was nervous to the point of being unable to speak. Right when the black energy around the black-clothed man started to expand out, Xianxia's trembling right hand pointed behind him as he said with a trembling voice, I saw a violet shadow flash by from here, and then it vanished. When he heard Yang Yi, the black energy on the black-clothed man's body calmed down. He went silent for a short while before he glanced at Yang Yi, who was trembling from head to toe, and then he shook his head. He had the intention to deal with Yang Yi, yet he abandoned such a thought when he saw Yang Ye's current state. He truly disdained to make a move against an expert at the mortal realm. Moreover, it was such an inferior fellow. If it was some unyielding fellows, then perhaps he would be interested in torturing the fellow, but he truly didn't want to waste his profound energy on someone like this fellow. It was just like an elephant and an ant. If the ant was careful, then the elephant wouldn't kill an ant intentionally. Fuck off! The black-clothed man spoke indifferently. When he heard this, Yang Yi seemed as if he'd received great amnesty. He hurriedly leaped off the tree, and then he dashed madly towards the distance. As he dashed, Yang Yi heaved a sigh of relief, and his expression returned to normal. There wasn't a trace of terror on his face, and he felt lucky in his heart. Luckily, I guessed correctly, the black-clothed man wasn't a good person at all. So, if one made an extremely unyielding display to such a person, or show no fear at all, then the black-clothed man would definitely detest the sight of him. Thus, he immediately feigned a weak appearance and made the black-clothed man disdain to make a move against him. Fortunately, he'd guessed correctly. When he saw Yang Yi vanish, the black-clothed man raised his hands into the air, and then the black energy around him instantly seemed as if it had come to life and rose explosively. In a mere instant, the black energy swept out 300 m away, and everywhere it passed, all plants and trees seemed like snow that had encountered boiling oil. They instantly transformed into a pool of black water. After a few more breaths of time, with the black-clothed man at the center, everything including the ground in an area of 300 m around the black-clothed man had turned pitch black. It was an extremely terrifying scene. After a short while, the black-clothed man withdrew all the black energy, and he muttered in a low voice, "Why has its aura vanished here? Could it be that someone captured it a step before me?" When he spoke up to hear, the black-clothed man turned around to look towards the sword sect, and he said in a low voice, "Could it be an expert of the sword sect?" As soon as he finished speaking, the black-clothed man hesitated for a moment before he transformed into a strand of black shadow that shot out in the direction of the sword sect. Yang Yi dashed madly all along the way, and he ran for around 6 hours before finally stopping when the sky turned dark. He found a natural cave in the surroundings and concealed the entrance properly, and then he withdrew the moonlight stone Manzi had given him yesterday. Under the illumination of the moonlight stone, Yang Yi saw the scene within the cave clearly. It wasn't small and was roughly able to accommodate a few tens of standing people, and there was a huge number of weeds in this cave. Obviously, this was probably a cave that belonged to a dark beast. When he noticed that there was no danger, Yang Yi sat cross-legged, and then he patted his stomach and said, "Little fellow, come out here. Let's have a proper chat." The little fellow wasn't an ordinary dark beast, and this was obvious from the little fellow's strange speed. However, he was slightly puzzled about why the little fellow had chosen him, and he was especially puzzled about how the little fellow was able to enter his stomach. Wait, not his stomach, but the vortex. This had truly exceeded the scope of his understanding. So, he decided that he would have a proper chat with the little fellow. After a short moment, there was no movement from within his stomach, and when Yang Yi took a look and saw the state the little fellow was in, the corners of his mouth instantly twisted. At this moment, the violet mink was laying with its eyes closed within his vortex dantian, and it frequently emanated a light sound of breathing. Obviously, the little fellow has already fallen asleep. Yang Yi almost exploded with anger when he saw the little fellow like this. This little fellow had entered his stomach without saying a thing, and it had even offended a heaven-defying expert. Moreover, he'd almost been killed at the hands of that black-clothed man. He dashed madly all the way because he was deeply afraid that the black-clothed man would catch up to him and end him if he was slow. It could be said that he was terrified all along the way, and he wished for nothing more than to grow 2 more legs. Yet the culprit for all of this had actually fallen asleep within his vortex dantian. It was intolerable. After calling out to the little fellow for around an hour, the little fellow finally came out from within the tiny vortex. The violet mink stopped in midair while its little claws rubbed its slightly drowsy eyes, and it seemed to be displeased that Yang Yi disturbed its sleep. After that, it glared fiercely at Yang Yi, and as if that wasn't enough, it fiercely claws its tiny claws at Yang Yi as if it was extremely displeased. Yang Yi gulped. This dark beast is too much like a human. It simply doesn't seem like a dark beast. For a time, he was at a loss for words. After a short while, the violet mink's sleepiness had dispersed, and its lively eyes stared at Yang Yi while blinking repeatedly. It seemed as if it was sizing Yang Yi up. Yang Yi took a deep breath and tried hard to calm himself. After a short while, he looked at this cute little fellow and said, Little fellow, you ought to be able to understand me. I want to say that I won't make a fuss about you entering my dantian to avoid calamity. That black-clothed man has left, so you can leave now. This little fellow was very cute. Extremely cute. If he took it back and gave it to Little Yao would definitely be extremely happy, or he could sell it and it would definitely sell for a good price. However, Yang Yi didn't dare do that because this little fellow was too mysterious. Moreover, it would draw the black-clothed man over. So, he decided to part ways with the little fellow. The violet mink blinked, yet it didn't nod or shake its head, and it just stared fixedly at Yang Yi. You're safe now, so you can go home. Understand? When he noticed the little fellow's lack of reaction, Yang Yi repeated once more. This time, the violet mink seemed as if it understood Yang Yi, and it shook its little head. Obviously, it was unwilling to leave. It refuses to leave me. When he saw the little fellow shake its head, the corners of Yang Yi's mouth twitched. Even though this little fellow was extremely cute, Yang Yi had still decided to make it leave. Because it was a calamity to him, and the black-clothed man might be drawn over again at any time. Moreover, if he allowed the little fellow to stay within his dantian, then it felt wrong no matter how he thought about it. After he made up his mind, Yang Yi continued. Little fellow, I'm a human, and you're a dark beast. It's dangerous for you to be with me. Understand? The violet mink blinked, yet it didn't shake its head nor nod. Humans are bad, and they'll roast you and eat you. Understand? The violet mink nodded, and it seemed as if it really agreed. Then quickly return to your home. Don't follow me. The violet mink shook its head, and it seemed as if it refused to leave him. Then what do you want? Yang Yi was slightly anxious, and his voice had grown louder. When it saw Yang Yi get angry, the violet mink seemed to be slightly afraid. It moved backward while moisture arose in its eyes, and its round little face carried a wronged expression. What misfortune! When he saw the violet mink reveal such an appearance, Yang Yi felt his head ache. He was even more certain that this little fellow wasn't an ordinary dark beast, because a dark beast had to attain the spirit realm before it could take human form and possess intelligence comparable to a human. However, this little fellow before him had obviously not attained the spirit realm, otherwise it would have taken human form since a long time ago. It was exactly because this little fellow hadn't attained the spirit realm that he felt this little fellow wasn't an ordinary dark beast. He'd never heard of a dark beast that possessed such intelligence before attaining the spirit realm. Even though he hadn't seen many dark beasts in his lifetime, his instinct told him that this little fellow was definitely not an ordinary dark beast. Yang Yi shrugged and said, Then what do you intend to do? When it heard Yang Yi, the violet mink grinned, and then its tiny claw pointed at Yang Yi's dantian while its intentions were obvious. You want to stay inside there? Asked Yang Yi. The little fellow hurriedly nodded its little head. Why? This question seemed to be slightly difficult to answer. The violet mink's tiny claw pointed at Yang Yi's dantian, then pointed at itself, and then its tiny claw ceaselessly gesticulated in midair while its little face was covered in excitement. Yang Yi. When it noticed Yang Yi's dazed expression, the little fellow stopped waving its tiny claws about, and then it flashed to descend onto Yang Yi's shoulder. After that, It rubbed its little head on Yang Ye's face as if they had a very good relationship. Yang Yi sighed in his heart. He knew that the little fellow was attached to him now, and he didn't even have a chance to flee before the little fellow's unusual speed. Never mind. What will be will be. In any case, I already have a mysterious tiny vortex in my possession, so it's fine to have another mysterious little fellow. It's all the same so long as I get used to it. After he figured it out, Yang Yi decided to figure out the little fellow's strength, and this caused Yang Yi agony. Yang Yi stretched out a finger and said, "First rank dark beast?" The little fellow shook its head. "Second rank dark beast?" The little fellow continued shaking its head. "Third rank dark beast?" After a period of difficult conversation, Yang Yi finally figured out the little fellow's strength. The little fellow was a 9th rank dark beast, but Yang Yi wasn't really sure of it. In any case, when he raised 9 fingers, the little fellow had finally nodded. As for the little fellow's combat strength, besides the ability to escape, its remaining ability was simply too horrible to look at. The formidable physique that dark beasts should possess was something the little fellow didn't possess. The advantage of an enormous figure that dark beasts possessed was something the little fellow didn't possess as well. In short, besides being able to flee swiftly, the little fellow didn't possess any ability in combat. Moreover, when Yang Yi asked it what it was capable of, besides flickering a few times, the little fellow merely blinked its large eyes. In the end, Yang Yi abandoned his thoughts that the little fellow was a divine beast. He'd heard of some legend where some people fell down a cliff, yet escaped death and even obtained the cultivation method and techniques left behind by a peerless expert, or someone that was born with some sort of extraordinary charm, and made countless divine beasts to kneel down and submit to him. In the beginning, he thought he possessed some sort of extraordinary charm as well, and he made this mysterious divine beast submit to him. However, cruel reality told him that besides being extremely skilled at fleeing, this mysterious divine beast didn't possess a shred of combat strength. The little fellow seemed to really like his tiny vortex, and the little fellow had transformed into a strand of violet light and entered into the tiny vortex as soon as it finished talking with him. There was a small pool within the tiny vortex, and it occupied an area of about 9 square meters. The small pool wasn't filled with water, and it was profound energy instead. It was full of golden profound energy. When he saw this pool of golden profound energy, Yang Yi felt his heart ache slightly, because this pool of profound energy was something that he'd accumulated through exhausting a few tens of thousands of energy stones. The most depressing thing to him was that this pool of profound energy didn't belong to him, and he was utterly unable to utilize this pool of profound energy. Moreover, it was even more depressing to him because a violet mink was within this pool of profound energy. Yes, that cute violet mink was happily swimming about in that pool of golden profound energy. When he saw the violet mink take the pool of golden profound energy to be its bathtub, Yang Yi felt especially uncomfortable in his heart. He withdrew his mind from within his body, and for the sake of preventing himself from feeling uncomfortable, Yang Yi decided to stop looking at the swimming mink. After staying silent for a moment, Yang Yi tried to enter once more into that strange state that had been interrupted by the black-clothed man. However, to his disappointment, he was unable to enter that state again after trying countless times. It really can only be chanced upon by luck. Yang Yi sighed in a low voice. Even though he didn't know what that state was, his instinct told him that if he was able to enter into that state, then it would definitely be extremely beneficial to him. However, unfortunately, it was spoiled by that black-clothed man. Bang! Right at this moment, an enormous bang resounded before a colossal black figure charged into the cave from the outside, and then it smashed down towards Yang Yi. Yang Ye's expression turned grim. It was too late for him to dodge, so he instinctively smashed his fist towards the colossal figure that was charging towards him. Bang! Shit! Yang Yi cried out in his heart as soon as his fist came into contact with the colossal figure. After that, an enormous force spread over towards him before a muffled groan resounded, and then his figure was blasted flying. Bang! His figure directly sunk into the wall. Pain, extreme pain. That was what Yang Yi felt at this moment. The bones in his entire body felt as if they were on the verge of falling apart. At the same time, Yang Yi felt fortunate in his heart. He felt fortunate that he'd cultivated the body refinement technique. If he hadn't cultivated the body refinement technique and utilized his golden profound energy to temper his body, then he would have definitely been transformed into a pile of mush by this attack. As he forcefully suppressed the numbness and pain in his entire body, Yang Yi hurriedly leaped out of the wall, and as soon as he descended, that colossal figure smashed over towards him once again. Yang Ye's pupils constricted as his golden profound energy circulated madly, and his right fist carried a light golden glow as it smashed towards the colossal figure that had already arrived before him. Bang! A muffled bang resounded before Yang Yi was blasted flying again, and he fell once more into the wall. However, that colossal figure was blasted a few steps back by Yang Ye's punch as well. How formidable! As he sensed the intense pain in his right arm, Yang Yi was moved. Under the amplification provided by the golden profound energy, he was actually blasted flying again, and this strength was too much stronger than his own. He would probably not be stronger than it even if he utilized a strength talisman. As thoughts flashed within his mind, Yang Yi leaped out from within the wall again. This time, the colossal figure didn't charge over again, and this allowed him to have a clear look of it. It was an enormous gray wolf that stood before him. The gray wolf's size was 3 times his own, and it was around 2 meters in height. Yang Yi was simply like a baby facing an adult when he stood before this colossal figure. Besides possessing an enormous figure, the most striking features of that gray wolf were its claws, and the 2 fangs that were exposed from its mouth. The gray wolf's claws were around the length of an arm, and they emanated a ghastly and cold glow. Moreover, the gray wolf's front claws would occasionally sweep past the ground, and a few extremely rifts would appear every time this happened. On the other hand, its fangs were over an entire 10 inches in length, and they were slightly curved like the sickle utilized by the god of death to reel the lives of man. It was quite terrifying. A peak 9th rank dark beast. With a single glance, Yang Yi determined the rank of this gray wolf. When he swept the surroundings with his gaze, Yang Yi understood why this gray wolf would suddenly launch an attack against him. This gray wolf was clearly the owner of this cave, and his sudden trespass into this place was undoubtedly a form of provocation in the world of dark beasts. Yang Yi took a deep breath before he stretched his limbs, causing the joints in his entire body to instantly start cracking. This 9th rank dark beast just happened to be a target that satisfied him. The gray wolf gazed at Yang Yi with a ferocious glow in its eyes, and its claws were ceaselessly digging at the ground. It was utterly exasperated by this human that dared to insult its dignity, and it raised its head and howled furiously before it pounced forward. It transformed into a gray shadow that smashed fiercely at Yang Yi. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw the gray wolf charging towards him. His legs scratched open a deep groove in the ground like an iron plow, and then his figure crouched partially while he stretched out his right hand and clenched it into a fist. After that, his right arm shrunk back while he slowly clenched his left hand tightly as well, and then a dazzling golden glow flickered on his right fist. At this moment, there wasn't a shred of fear on his face. When the gray wolf had charged over to arrive a few inches before Yang Yi, Yang Yi shouted furiously as his right hand suddenly smashed over towards the rapidly approaching gray wolf. Bang! The man and wolf fiercely collided with each other in a direct manner. The enormous force from the collision caused Yang Yi's legs to rub the ground as he retreated rapidly. After he dug out a groove that was a few meters long on the ground, he collided with the wall in the end, causing the entire cave to instantly suffer a wave of rumbling. On the other hand, the gray wolf had merely taken a few steps back. When he noticed the gray wolf had been blasted back by his attack, even though Yang Yi's entire body was aching, he was still delighted in his heart, because this gray wolf wasn't impossible to defeat. When he thought up to here, Yang Yi swung his fist and gazed towards the gray wolf in the distance, and then he stretched out his thumb before turning it to point downwards. After that, he stretched out his index finger and gestured towards the gray wolf in a provoking manner. Ow! Even though the gray wolf didn't possess human intelligence, it still possessed some intelligence, and it was furious when it saw Yang Yi make such a provocative gesture. It raised its head and roared furiously before it pounced. A cold glow flashed on its claws, and it carried a strand of the sharp sound of the air being torn apart as it clawed fiercely towards Yang Yi from above. When he saw the gray wolf pounce over, Yang Ye's eyes narrowed, and then his figure crouched partially while he clenched his hands into fists. When the gray wolf arrived before his body, Yang Yi shouted furiously before suddenly swinging both his fists out. Bang! The two of them collided, and then a strand of intense pain came from Yang Ye's fists. Yang Yi let out a muffled groan while a mouthful of blood sprayed from his mouth. On the other hand, the gray wolf was blasted flying as well. However, in the next moment, the gray wolf howled before it leaped once more and pounced towards Yang Yi. Yang Ye's pupils constricted when he noticed the gray wolf pouncing over once more. He suppressed the roiling vital blood in his heart before his right leg suddenly stomped on the ground, and he relied on the counterforce from this and allowed his body to instantly blast forward. His right fist carried the sound of wind being torn apart as it smashed fiercely towards the gray wolf's head. Bang! The man and wolf collided once more. However, this time, the gray wolf wasn't blasted flying again, and it had utilized its claws to forcefully grab hold of Yang Ye's fists. After that, its long fangs stabbed fiercely at Yang Ye's head. When he noticed his fists were restrained and those two fangs were stabbing towards him, Yang Yi was astounded in his heart, and he didn't give it any thought before smashed his leg at the gray wolf's stomach. Bang! The gray wolf wailed from having its stomach attacked, and its claws instantly released Yang Ye's hands. Yang Yi was stunned, and it was precisely this instant of absent-mindedness that allowed the gray wolf's claws to claw fiercely at Yang Ye's chest. Yang Yi instantly seemed as if he'd been struck by a heavy blow, and his figure was blasted flying. Bang! After flying for a few meters, he fell once more into the wall. Cough! Yang Yi had just stood up with great difficulty, and his mind was slightly dizzy. It was right at this moment that a pair of sharp claws seemed as if they'd passed through space and struck fiercely towards his chest once again. In an instant, the pair of sharp claws were like a storm that was swung countless times on Yang Ye's chest, face, and head. Ding! Ding! When these countless strikes struck on Yang Ye's body, it was like those sharp claws were striking on metal. Not only did they claw open countless bloody marks on Yang Ye's body, the sound of metal being struck resounded successively, and it was like a beautiful musical composition. Bang! The gray wolf smashed its head onto Yang Ye's stomach, causing an enormous bang to resound before Yang Ye's body scraped the ground as it flew backward. Rumble! In the end, he collided with the wall of the cave, casing countless rocks to rain down and bury Yang Yi beneath them. The gray wolf would naturally not let Yang Yi off. Right when it intended to swallow Yang Yi into its belly, the howl of a wolf suddenly resounded from outside the cave. The gray wolf's expression changed when it heard this howl, and it didn't hesitate at all to run out of the cave. Right after the gray wolf left, Yang Yi crawled out from beneath the pile of rocks. At this moment, his mind and consciousness were slightly blurred, and he was only able to feel that his entire body was filled with pain, extreme pain, pain that went deep into his marrow. If he didn't force himself to stay conscious with extremely strong willpower, he would have probably fainted from pain by now. After a short moment, Yang Ye's mind finally cleared up slightly, and when he noticed the gray wolf was gone, the first thing he did was run. Once he left the gray wolf's cave, Yang Yi found a luxuriant tree and sat cross-legged above it before he lowered his head to look at the state of his body, and Yang Yi instantly gasped at this sight. At this moment, his clothes were already in rags, and his body was densely covered in bloody marks. Those bloody marks crisscrossed on his body in an extremely irregular manner, and coupled with the blood on his body that hadn't dried, it seemed to be extremely horrifying. I underestimated my enemy this time. Yang Yi laughed bitterly as he shook his head. That day, he'd killed the colossal Python King with his fists, and then he'd annihilated a 7th-rank dark beast, the twin-wing python, with a single sword strike. This made him think that 9th-rank dark beasts would definitely not be anything great. However, reality told him that 9th-rank dark beasts were too much stronger than 7th-rank dark beasts. Yet he'd overestimate his strength and competed in physical strength with a 9th-rank dark beast. And that was truly like courting death. However, this battle slightly surprised him as well because his physical strength was actually so formidable. Even though there was still a gap in physical strength between him and a 9th-rank dark beast, it was undeniable that the defensive ability and strength of his body was stronger than a human at a similar cultivation realm. Perhaps, even the body of a First Heaven realm expert wasn't as formidable as his own. This discovery caused him to feel slightly delighted. Originally, cultivating the body refinement technique was something he'd done because he had no other choice. But he'd never imagined that when he utilized the golden profound energy to temper his body according to the body refinement technique, it would actually be formidable to such an extent. In the future, his body itself could be utilized as a trump card against his enemies. When the intense pain in his body struck him once more, Xianxia restrained his thoughts before closing his eyes slightly. The golden profound energy in his body surged and recovered his extremely damaged body. The golden profound energy was like numerous warm streams that flowed throughout his entire body. Everywhere it passed, Xianxia clearly sensed his injuries healing, and even though it was slightly slow and difficult to notice, he was still able to sense it. This caused him to feel delighted, and then he sped up the circulation of the profound energy within his body. The night passed without him noticing it at all. When a red rising sun arose on the horizon, Xianxia, who sat cross-legged on the tree, opened his eyes. After consuming 6 energy stones and a night of time, even though the injuries on his body hadn't been healed completely, he was already able to fight. Xianxia leaped off the tree and descended to the ground, and then he stretched his limbs. As he sensed the abundant profound energy within his body, Xianxia beamed from ear to ear, and he said in his heart, "Energy stones really are great, and I can lavishly exhaust my profound energy at will because of them." If he didn't possess the ceaseless provision of energy from the energy stones, then the heavy injury he suffered this time would be impossible to recover from without 5 or 6 days of time. All hail Bauer! When he thought of how he still possessed a few tens of thousands of energy stones, Xianxia felt like returning to the sword sect and taking Bauer in his arms before giving her a long kiss on the cheek. These energy stones were really too useful to him. After a moment of happiness, Xianxia's wrist flipped, and a short dagger appeared in his hand. His sword had broken into pieces for no reason or rhyme that day, and he didn't possess any extra swords, so he could only utilize this dagger as a replacement. As he held the dagger, Xianxia was like a nimble leopard as he charged towards the Grey Wolf's cave, because he wasn't willing to let such a good opponent go. Bang! Within the Grey Wolf's cave, the man and wolf entered once more into battle. The Grey Wolf was truly enraged by this human that had offended it for the second time, and it seemed as if it had gone mad as its sharp claws and fangs swung madly at Xianxia. This time, Xianxia acted smartly. He stopped competing in strength with the Grey Wolf, and he used technique against it instead. Now, he stopped attacking the Grey Wolf head-on, and he started to use a hit-and-run tactic against it. So long as he grasped an opportunity, the dagger in his hand would cause a few strands of blood to spray from the Grey Wolf's body. The Grey Wolf's size was an advantage, yet it could be considered a disadvantage as well. Just like this very moment, its size wasn't of any use at all. Not only was it unable to fight nimbly because of it, but Xianxia had also even taken it to be a living punching bag because of its size, and it allowed Xianxia's dagger to basically never miss once it was swung. However, it wasn't easy for Xianxia as well, because when the Grey Wolf occasionally collided with his body, it caused his entire body to feel as if it was falling apart. If it wasn't for the golden profound energy's ceaseless repairs of his body, he might have already dropped to the ground. The man and wolf exchanged blows for around 2 hours. At this moment, there were already over 10 claw marks on Xianxia's body, whereas the Grey Wolf's body was densely covered in injuries as well. However, with the Grey Wolf's size and the defensive capability of its body, all of those could only be considered as superficial injuries, and they were utterly unable to injure it at the core. Bang! A moment of carelessness caused Xianxia to be blasted flying by the Grey Wolf. However, in the next moment, Xianxia's who'd sunk into the wall had leaped out and charged towards the Grey Wolf. The gray wolf's eyelids twitched when it saw this human charge once more towards it. Obviously, the way Yang Yi seemed to disregard his life as he fought caused the gray wolf to feel slightly fearful. However, even though it was fearful, the gray wolf didn't shrink back. If it was any other place, then perhaps it wouldn't fight to the death. But this was its lair, and it wouldn't abandon its lair no matter what. After another 2 hours of fighting, this battle finally ended with Yang Yi fleeing in defeat. Yang Yi had no choice but to flee because the profound energy within his body had been completely exhausted. After all, he'd utilized his profound energy with every swing of the dagger, and without the support of his golden profound energy, he would be utterly unable to break through the gray wolf's defenses. Moreover, the profound energy had to repair his body, so it was utterly insufficient for him to spend like this. So, he had no choice but to withdraw for now. The gray wolf didn't give chase when it saw Yang Yi flee in defeat, and it lay down on the ground instead before gasping for air. Over 4 hours of battle, and coupled with the fact that Yang Yi fought as if he'd disregarded his life, it caused the gray wolf to be extremely exhausted. Now, it just hoped that this human wouldn't come to its cave again. However, it was disappointed. After less than an hour, that human had appeared once more within its cave, and then another round of battle started. Just like this, Yang Yi fought the gray wolf for a few hours and then he fled. After his profound energy recovered, he went looking for the gray wolf again, and this continued for 2 days. The gray wolf felt more aggrieved the more it fought, whereas Yang Yi grew excited the more he fought. Every time he returned to battle the gray wolf after fleeing, his combat technique would improve slightly, and this caused the gray wolf to feel extremely and utterly aggrieved. During this period of time, the gray wolf had tried to chase Yang Yi down when he fled. However, it was disappointed. This human before it was simply not like a human at all. He fled as he fought, and he would ascend a tree when he was truly unable to fight any longer. The gray wolf couldn't do anything about this because it wasn't a flying dark beast, and it could only utilize its head to strike the tree. Tree after tree rumbled and collapsed, yet that human just wouldn't fall to the ground, so in the end, it gave up. On the 6th day, the 6th day that Yang Yi fought the gray wolf, he didn't flee any longer. He was already able to fight the gray wolf with ease. 3 days later, Yang Yi had already occupied a superior position in their battle, and he fully controlled the rhythm of the battle. Ow! Yang Yi sat on the gray wolf's back with his legs clenched tightly to its sides, and his fists flickered with a light golden glow as they smashed down towards the gray wolf's head. Every single punch struck firmly on the gray wolf, and the gray wolf's wails resounded within the cave. For the sake of getting rid of Yang Yi, the gray wolf rolled on the ground and carried Yang Yi along as it collided with the walls of the cave. Countless large holes were smashed open on the walls, yet Yang Yi just wouldn't let go, and he would smash a punch onto the gray wolf's head with every opportunity he had. Presently, the man and wolf were competing to see who would be the first to be unable to persist. This continued for around 2 hours when it suddenly went quiet within the cave. The man and wolf were both lying on the ground. Yang Yi was still breathing while the gray wolf was still breathing as well. They gazed at each other from 3 m away, yet both of them didn't charge forward because both of them didn't have any strength left. As the gray wolf looked at Yang Yi, its gaze was filled with deep fear, and what he felt instinctively right now was that this human was even more terrifying than a dark beast. On the other hand, Yang Ye's eyes flickered with excitement because he'd defeated a 9th-rank dark beast under the condition of not utilizing any sword techniques. Even though he'd spend almost 10 days to accomplish it, it was still something he'd accomplished. An hour later, Yang Yi slowly crawled up from the ground. At this moment, he'd already recovered by more than 50%. When it saw Yang Yi stand up, the gray wolf finally revealed an expression of terror in its eyes. It wanted to crawl up as well, but it failed in the end. Yang Yi walked slowly over to the gray wolf while moving his arms back and forth, and he revealed a sinister smile. It's time to dig out the inner core and gather wolf skin. Right at this moment, a violet light flashed, and the violet mink appeared before Yang Yi. The violet mink's little claw pointed at the gray wolf on the ground, then looked at Yang Yi before it hurriedly shook its little head. Yang Yi was stunned, and then he asked, You want me to spare it? The violet mink hurriedly nodded. Don't joke around. Inner cores are extremely valuable, and wolf skin is extremely valuable as well. How can I spare it? When it heard Yang Yi, the little fellow flashed over to Yang Yi and used its little claw to rub Yang Ye's nose, and it revealed a pleasing expression. Yang Yi felt his head ache when he saw the little fellow play this trick again, and then he gazed at the gray wolf on the ground. Yang Yi was shocked when he saw the gray wolf's appearance at this moment because the gray wolf's body was actually trembling lightly, and its eyes clearly carried fear while it looked at the violet mink. This wolf is afraid of the little fellow? This was Yang Ye's thought at this moment. He glanced at the gray wolf, and then he glanced at the violet mink that was acting cute before he said, "It's afraid of you?" The violet mink blinked, and then it looked at the gray wolf before blinking again. After that, it descended onto the gray wolf's head with a single flicker. When it saw the violet mink descend on its head, the gray wolf's body trembled even more violently, and its body was completely pressed down on the ground. It was humble like a servant. The violet mink patted the gray wolf's head with its tiny claw and then nodded with satisfaction. Obviously, it was extremely satisfied with the gray wolf's attitude. In the next moment, the violet mink swung its tiny claw, and then, under Yang Ye's astounded gaze, the gray wolf transformed into a strand of violet light and entered into Yang Ye's body. At this moment, Yang Yi was dumbstruck. After he returned to his senses, Yang Yi hurriedly checked the situation within his body. Just as he'd expected, the gray wolf that he'd originally bashed up to the point of being on the verge of death was sizing up the surroundings within his vortex dantian with curiosity. After being momentarily stunned by the scene before it, the gray wolf revealed an extremely delighted appearance just like the violet mink had when it just entered his dantian, and then it started ceaselessly roaming about within his vortex dantian. After roaming for a while, the gray wolf noticed the pool of profound energy, and this discovery was extraordinary to it. It seemed like a man that had been hungry for a few days and had finally encountered a plate of meat, and even its eyes turned red. However, the gray wolf didn't charge into it and start bathing in it as the little fellow had. It paced up and down by the side of the pool, and it wanted to jump in yet seemed to be fearful of something. Yang Yi opened his eyes and gazed at the violet mink before him. Needless to say, this was extremely shocking to him. He'd truly never imagined that the little fellow could actually send dark beasts into his vortex dantian. Moreover, after the gray wolf entered his dantian, it seemed to be extremely happy, and this caused Yang Yi to be extraordinarily bewildered. Why was the little fellow able to enter his vortex? Why was the little fellow able to send dark beasts into the vortex? Why would the gray wolf fear the little fellow? What exactly was that vortex? Why was it so miraculous? A string of questions appeared in Yang Ye's mind, but he was bound to be unable to figure out the answer. Because after he asked the little fellow about all of this, the little fellow was even more bewildered than he was, and it ceaselessly shook its little head to indicate it didn't know why. Or perhaps it was hiding something. Yang Yi gave up on pursuing an answer, and then he pointed at the location his dantian resided and said, "Can it help me to fight in the future?" The little fellow didn't possess any combat strength, and he could accept this because the little fellow was extremely cute and little. However, if this wolf didn't help him fight, then he wouldn't allow the wolf to eat and live within him for free. The violet mink blinked, and then it nodded. Yang Yi started laughing when he saw the little fellow nod, and he laughed in a slightly complacent manner. It was a 9th-rank dark beast. A 9th-rank dark beast as his goon. Just thinking about it was extremely delightful. After his excitement passed, Yang Yi rubbed the little fellow's head and nodded with satisfaction, and then he said, You did very well, little fellow. That gray wolf is your underling, and you have to teach it well and make it obedient, understand?" Yang Yi wasn't stupid. The gray wolf was hostile towards him, yet it wasn't hostile to the little fellow, and it was even very fearful of the little fellow. So, the responsibility of disciplining could only be given to the little fellow. The violet mink blinked and then nodded. People are always in high spirits after encountering happy events. A brilliant smile was constantly present on Yang Ye's face after he left the cave. and he'd already started thinking of a grand plan. His vortex dantian was extremely big, and it ought to not be a problem for it to accommodate a few hundred dark beasts. If he had around 109th rank dark beasts, then he would even be able to crush a first heaven realm expert. Yang Yi became more and more delighted and excited as he thought about this, and he seemed to be already able to see the scene of a pile of dark beasts appearing with a swing of his arm. Suddenly, the smile on Yang Ye's face froze. In the next moment, he entered into a dense bush as swiftly as he could. At the same time, he hurriedly held his breath with concentration and made himself into a statue. Swish! Right at this moment, through the spaces between the dense bush, Yang Yi saw a faint black shadow approach from afar with extreme speed. The black shadow was swift like a ghost, and as the black shadow flashed on the treetops, the trees didn't even shake in the slightest. With a few flashes, the black shadow descended merely around 40 m away from Yang Yi. The corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitched, and he cursed this person's entire family in his heart. You just had to run over to me. How can my tiny body endure the trouble caused by all of these monsters? The black shadow wore a black robe, and he didn't continue fleeing after descending to the ground. He flipped his right hand instead, and a bloody blade that seemed as if it was forged from fresh blood appeared in his hand. The bloody blade was extremely unusual, and the stench of blood within it was something Yang Yi could smell clearly from around 40 m away. Right at this moment, a white shadow flew over from afar on a sword. Yang Ye's heart thumped when he saw the appearance of this woman. The woman wore a moon-white dress. She had willow-shaped brows, slanted eyes, snow-white skin, cherry lips, and a flawless face that was crystalline like jade. As she stood on the enormous green-colored sword, her white dress fluttered, and she seemed otherworldly, noble, and pure like a celestial maiden. It seemed as if it was a sin just to take a glance at her. The woman was extremely swift, and she was even slightly faster than the blade shadow. In practically an instant, she'd arrived near the black shadow, and she stood on a treetop while she pointed the green sword in her hand at the black-robed man. Moreover, there were a few strands of fierce sword chi flickering ceaselessly on the sword. How beautiful! How formidable! As he looked at the woman that seemed like a celestial maiden, Yang Yi gulped. She's able to fly with a sword, so she'd at least at the spirit realm. Of course, he wasn't concerned about their strengths, and he was concerned about whether the two of them were about to fight. If they were to fight here, then with their strengths, probably the slightest aftershock would be able to annihilate him 10 times over. Fairy Sue, you really do refuse to go away. You've been chasing me for a few days now. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? The black-robed man gazed at the woman that stood on the treetop, and he spoke with a hoarse voice. His voice was extremely unpleasant, and it was like a sharp object scratching on a rock and was extraordinarily jarring to the ear. Bloodhand, why waste your breath? Since your ghost sect dared to come to kill at my sword sect, then you ought to have thought about the consequences. You can dream of fleeing today. The woman called Fairy Sue spoke in cold voice. The ghost sect? The sword sect? Yang Yi was shocked in his heart. This woman is actually a member of the sword sect. Right, she was able to fly with a sword, and her sword even emanating such fierce sword chi. Doesn't that belong precisely to the sword sect? Flee! Bloodhand laughed coldly, and then he looked over to the spot where Yang Yi was hiding. Shit! Yang Yi cried out in his heart when he saw the black-robed man look over towards him. Right when Yang Yi was about to flee, a strand of blood-red light had already struck his chest, and he let out a shrill cry before his figure that just stood up fell flat on the ground again. As expected of you, you aren't even willing to spare a mortal realm profounder. The woman's expression turned even colder when she saw Bloodhand execute a lethal strike against a profounder at the mortal realm. Spare! Bloodhand laughed with ridicule and said, Now is the time to fight a battle of life and death, and I don't want any variable to appear. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slashed the bloody blade in his hand towards the white-clothed woman, and then a bloody glow that was over 30 m long flashed out from it before it shot fiercely towards the woman who stood on the treetop. The bloody glow seemed as if it was condensed into form by countless strands of blood, and a bloody smell of blood effused out from the bloody glow and covered the heavens and the earth. The white-clothed woman's expression remained unchanged when she saw the bloody glow shoot towards her. Right when it was about to arrive before her, the white-clothed woman's figure flashed like a spirit and instantly vanished on the spot. She appeared on the ground next, and the sword in her fair hand carried a revolving gale as it stabbed forcefully towards Bloodhand. Bang! The bloody glow blasted onto an enormous tree behind the white-clothed woman, and the enormous tree was instantly split into two while bits of wood shot through the sky. In the blink of an eye, the sword in the woman's hand was pressing down towards Bloodhand. Bloodhand's eyes focused while his right leg suddenly stomped on the ground, and his figure leaped up. His hands held onto the bloody blade in his hand as it emanated a sharp whistle through the air, and then it slashed down fiercely at the woman. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly upon noticing the bloody blade's approach, and she flicked her sword upwards. Clang! The two of them collided directly with each other, and sparks shot out from the point of the collision. At the instant they collided, a few strands of sword chi suddenly left the woman's sword, and they slashed towards Bloodhand's neck. Bloodhand's expression turned grim when he noticed the sword chi approaching him. Fortunately, he'd fought the white-clothed woman a few times now, and he'd taken precautions since the beginning. When the sword chi left her sword, a few strands of bloody light surged out from Bloodhand's body, and these bloody lights formed a blood-red barrier around him. Along with a few clangs resounding through the air, those few strands of sword chi didn't cause any trouble to Bloodhand before they were completely dispersed. On the other hand, the barrier formed from the strands of bloody light instantly broke up into their previous form and assaulted the woman's face. The woman's beautiful brows knit together upon noticing this, and her body suddenly leaned back like it had been split into two. After that, her wrist spun and the sword in her hand slashed horizontally in an extremely natural manner. At the same time, a few strands of sword chi on the sword had shot out from it, and they shot towards the vital points throughout Bloodhand's body. Bloodhand's eyelids twitched when he sensed the sword slash towards his stomach and those strands of fierce sword chi assaulting him. His wrist moved to place the bloody blade horizontally before him, and then his right leg tapped lightly on the ground, causing his figure to shoot backward. During the process of his retreat, the bloody blade in his hand spun without end. Ding! Ding! All the strands of sword chi were blocked off. However, after he did that, Bloodhand's expression changed once more. He saw a cold glow flash before a sword and a few strands of sword chi were stabbing towards his face. Bloodhand didn't dare be careless when facing this attack. His right leg stomped once more on the ground, and his figure shot backward like a cannonball. The woman didn't stop, and she transformed into a shadow while the sword in her hand was like a whirlwind, and it carried a few strands of fierce sword chi as it stabbed explosively towards Bloodhand. How formidable! After he witnessed the battle between them, Yang Yi, who lay in the bushes, was shocked in his heart. He'd naturally not died, because when the bloody red light had just shot towards him, Yang Yi had forcefully twisted his body, causing that blood-red glow that was originally targeted at his heart to strike his left chest instead. Even though there was a hole in his left chest, it wasn't lethal. He wanted to flee, yet he didn't dare flee. Even though the two of them were in an intense battle, it was simply too easy for them to kill him. So, he continued laying on the spot and watched their battle. Yang Yi was extremely shocked by the sight of their battle, especially that woman's sword technique. Every single sword strike carried a few strands of sword chi as it attacked, and that sword chi was extremely troublesome to the black-robed man, causing him to be hesitant, cautious, and not dare to exchange blows with her for extended periods of time. It really was like a single sword that could overcome all techniques. As he gazed at the whirlwind and sword chi, Bloodhand revealed a wisp of a savage expression, and the bloody blade in his hand suddenly started to tremble. Bloodhand let out a furious shout before the bloody blade suddenly slashed down. In an instant, a bloody glow that was numerous times larger than before shot out explosively from the tip of the bloody blade, and everywhere it passed, a deep trench appeared on the ground. Bang! The bloody glow collided forcefully with the whirlwind. Instantly, numerous blast waves appeared out of thin air within the forest. The waves swept swiftly towards the surroundings, and everywhere they passed, all plants and trees were completely destroyed. They left a mess in their wake. Ha! Right at this moment, a delicate shout resounded amidst the blast waves. 10 strands of sword chi shot out explosively from within the blast waves, and they were lined up in a row and seemed to tear air apart. Everywhere they passed, numerous sharp sounds of the air being torn apart resounded. As he gazed at these 10 strands of sword chi, Xianxia's pupils constricted. This woman has actually cultivated the energy split sword technique to the highest level, and she's even able to make it attack in this sort of way. She's too formidable. Bloodhand's expression was extremely heavy when he saw those 10 strands of sword chi shoot explosively towards him. He stretched out his left hand before suddenly clenching it. Instantly, a bloody glow effused out from the point he clenched his hand at, and it instantly formed into an extremely thick blood-red shield that stood before him. Bang! The 10 strands of sword chi collided one after the other with the enormous shield. Under the impact of the sword chi, Bloodhand's figure was shaken to the point of retreating without end, and every single strand of sword chi that collided with that energy shield was able to cause it to dim down slightly. Bang! When the 9th strand of sword chi collided with the shield instantly became extremely thin as if it was translucent. Bang! When the 10 strands of sword chi collided with the shield instantly dispersed to reveal Bloodhand, who stood behind it with a terrified expression. Hiss! A sword pierced through Bloodhand's chest like a bolt of lightning, causing a strand of fresh blood to spray out. The white-clothed woman flashed by Bloodhand and appeared behind him to catch her sword, and then her figure spun rapidly before she stabbed the sword through Bloodhand's back. At this moment, Bloodhand's left hand was holding forcefully onto the tip of the sword that pierced through his chest from behind, and fresh blood instantly dyed the sword red. Black blood seal! Bloodhand's furious shout suddenly resounded. A strand of scarlet-red blood instantly effused out from where Bloodhand's hand held the tip of the sword, and then black energy tainted the scarlet-red blood, causing it to instantly become black blood. The black blood swiftly flowed along the sword, and in the blink of an eye, it passed through the sword and spread onto the woman's body. At the same time, Bloodhand's right leg suddenly stomped on the ground, and he utilized the force from this to leap forward. The sword left his body and carried out another string of fresh blood. Yet this time it was black in color. When she sensed the black blood enter her body, and the sword in her hand had actually become black in color and lost all of its spirit, the woman's icy cold face wasn't as indifferent as it was before this. She finally revealed a trace of a serious expression as she raised her head to look at Bloodhand, and then she said in a low voice, "You actually dared to utilize a forbidden divine ability. Aren't you afraid of dropping a realm in your cultivation and be forever unable to advance again?" The woman's words seemed to have hit Bloodhand's sore spot, and his ghastly pale face was covered in a savage expression as he said in an insane manner, "Dropping a realm in my cultivation? That's better than losing my life. Fairy Sue, do you feel like the profound energy within your body is gradually flowing away now? Haha. In another moment, you'll become a cripple that doesn't possess any profound energy. At that time, I'll make you suffer." Cough. He seemed to have become too excited, and it caused 2 strands of black blood to spray out from the 2 holes on his chest. Xianxia frowned when he heard Bloodhand, and he said in his heart, "Shit, Bloodhand is going to win." With Bloodhand's degree of ruthlessness, Xianxia would most probably be killed. However, he was helpless at this moment. Even though Bloodhand seemed to be heavily injured already, Bloodhand was still definitely not someone Xianxia could go against right now. Xianxia took a deep breath and looked at the white-clothed woman at the side. At this moment, he just hoped that the woman had some sort of a contingency plan. The woman's beautiful brows knit together when she noticed the profound energy within her body was swiftly flowing away, and she glanced at Bloodhand, who stood in the distance while a resolute expression flashed on her face. With a flip of her hand, the sword in her hand vanished. After that, she fully opened her right palm, and then she bent her ring finger and little finger before her thumb pressed down on them. After that, her index finger and middle finger were pressed together to form a sword. She flicked this sword towards Bloodhand. In an instant, A strand of sword chi shot out explosively from the tip of her finger. "You're courting death by doing this." Bloodhand's eyelids twitched when he saw the woman utilized her profound energy by force, and then he dodged to the side while he shouted furiously with a voice that carried a terrified tone. At this moment, he was already completely spent, and if he were to be struck by the woman's sword chi, then he would probably be the one to die. The woman paid no attention to Bloodhand. The tip of her feet tapped lightly on the ground before her figure rose into the air, and then she charged towards Bloodhand as if she was gliding in midair. She rapidly swung the sword she'd formed with her fingers while she flew in midair. Every single swing caused a strand of fierce and swift sword chi to shoot out explosively. As she charged rapidly all along the way, she'd executed no less than a few tens of strands of sword chi, and the sword chi that covered the sky seemed like dense droplets of rain descending towards Bloodhand. As he hid within the bushes, Xianxia's heart surged like the tide. This sword technique is too formidable. It's absolutely much more formidable than the energy split sword technique. This woman's status in the sword sect is absolutely not low, and it's possible that she's an elder. Bloodhand's eyelids twitched when he saw so many strands of sword chi assaulting him, and he was extremely astounded in his heart. A trace of a resolute expression flashed on his face, and he disregarded the blood that flowed from his chest as he stretched his right hand forward and clenched it. A bloody glow effused out and instantly formed a black energy shield. As his profound energy was ceaselessly poured into the black energy shield, fresh blood sprayed out like fountains from the two holes in his chest. Even though his chest was bleeding without end, Bloodhand didn't stop pouring his profound energy into the black energy shield. He knew that this was the woman's final attack, and he would be the final victor if he was able to withstand this wave of attacks. On the other hand, if he was unable to withstand it, then the consequences were obvious. So, he had to withstand this wave of attacks no matter what. Bang! Countless strands of sword chi blasted onto the energy shield, causing incessant explosions to resound within the forest. At this moment, the woman had descended to the ground as well, and she stared fixedly at the place where the energy shield and sword chi collided and exploded. If Bloodhand was able to hold on, then it was obvious what would happen to the white-clothed woman who'd lost all her profound energy. Ha ha! After a short moment, the energy shield gradually vanished, and Bloodhand's unbridled and roaring laughter resounded from behind it. After the black energy shield vanished completely, the figure of Bloodhand, who had a ghastly pale countenance, was revealed. At this moment, even though his countenance was ghastly pale, his face held a trace of a smile, and it was a smile from surviving a calamity. The woman took a deep breath and revealed a wisp of a bitter expression when she saw Bloodhand was still alive. After that, she closed her eyes slowly before she flipped her right hand, and her sword appeared once more in her hand. Even though she'd lost all her profound energy, it didn't mean that she was willing to wait for death to arrive. "Aren't you extremely disappointed? Fairy Sue, didn't I just kill a few outer court disciples from your sword sect? Yet you pursued me for 3 days and 3 nights. What will I do now? Not only will I humiliate you to death, but I'll even hang your corpse on the Imperial City's gate and make the sword sect's reputation sweep the floor." Cough. Bloodhand held the bloody blade in hand as he gradually approached the woman. At this moment, he was extremely complacent because he'd accumulated a bellyful of resentment since a long time ago after he'd been pursued by this woman for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, victory was within his grasps, so he fully vented the resentment in his heart. The woman didn't provide the slightest reaction towards Bloodhand's words, and her face was extremely calm, as if she hadn't heard him at all. Bloodhand instantly felt bored when he noticed the woman didn't become terrified from his words. He'd originally intended to terrify the woman so that she would beg for mercy. However, he was disappointed because the woman before him was truly calm like motionless water in her heart, and she wasn't affected by anything in the outside world. "It's over," Bloodhand shouted in a low voice as he charged towards the woman. He didn't utilize the bloody blade, and he kicked at the woman's stomach instead. Obviously, he wanted to cripple her dantian. When she sensed the sound of air being torn apart by Bloodhand's leg, The woman suddenly opened her eyes before she hurled the sword with her right hand, and it transformed into a cold glow that shot out explosively. At the same time, she overlapped her hands before herself, and then suddenly pushed them forward to block Bloodhand's fierce kick. Bloodhand hadn't imagined that the woman still had the ability to attack, and in a moment of carelessness, the sword pierced through Bloodhand's chest again. On the other hand, the woman was blasted flying from the force of his kick, and she fell heavily to the ground after flying a few meters away. Yang Yi was delighted in his heart upon witnessing the sword penetrate through Bloodhand's chest. However, the smile on his face froze before it could even stretch out, because Bloodhand, who'd had his chest penetrated by a sword for the third time, hadn't fallen to the ground. He gradually sat down cross-legged on the ground, and then withdrew a talisman and tossed it into the air. After it flew up into the sky, the talisman shook before it vanished in the sky. A transmission talisman. Yang Ye's face turned grim when he saw that talisman. As its name implied, the transmission talisman was utilized to transmit messages. This transmission talisman Bloodhand utilized was obviously a mid-grade transmission talisman, and it was capable of transmitting messages through a distance of 400 kilometers. In other words, Bloodhand had companions within an area of 400 kilometers in the surroundings. Yang Yi decisively withdrew a high-grade strength talisman and slapped it onto his body. After that, he withdrew the dagger before his right leg stomped swiftly at the ground, and then his figure shot out like a cannonball towards Bloodhand, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground. When he was only 10 m away from Bloodhand, he suddenly slashed the dagger in his hand at Bloodhand. Energy split sword technique. A golden strand of sword chi shot out explosively from the tip of the dagger in Yang Ye's hand. After he executed this strand of sword chi, Yang Yi didn't stop, and he successively executed another 2 strands of sword chi. "Kid, don't you dare!" Bloodhand was horrified when he saw those 3 strands of sword chi that suddenly shot towards him. He stretched out his right hand and clenched it, causing a slightly thin blood shield to flash into appearance. And the blood shield had just appeared when a mouthful of blood sprayed from Bloodhand's mouth. Bang! The first strand of sword chi blasted onto the blood shield, and the shield shook slightly while Bloodhand, who sat behind the shield, spat out another mouthful of blood. When the second strand of sword chi blasted onto the blood shield, the already dim blood shield dispersed in the air with a bang. Bloodhand's pupils constricted into the shape of needles when he saw the blood shield vanish. Never had he imagined that this piece of trash at the mortal realm would actually be able to break through his blood shield. Even though he was exhausted, this fellow before him was only at the mortal realm, the mortal realm. Hiss! The golden strand of sword chi penetrated through Bloodhand's heavily wounded chest, and then a shrill and miserable cry resounded while Bloodhand was blasted flying. Moreover, right when Bloodhand was blasted flying, a figure appeared before him, and the dagger in the figure's hand swept towards Bloodhand's head. When he saw the dagger sweeping over, Bloodhand disregarded the injuries on his chest, and he clenched his right hand before swiftly smashing it at Yang Ye's dagger. Hiss! Yang Ye's dagger that was suffused with a golden glow sliced through Bloodhand's right hand as if was cutting through vegetables, and then it didn't slow down at all as it swept towards Bloodhand's neck. How could this? Bloodhand's eyes were opened wide and filled with disbelief. He wasn't even able to finish his last words when a head that carried a strand of black blood along with it was tossed into the sky. Yang Yi wouldn't give this fellow an explanation. After he sliced off Bloodhand's head, Yang Yi hurriedly put away the bloody blade that Bloodhand held in his right hand and the spatial ring Bloodhand had on his hand, and then he ran to the white-clothed woman that sat cross-legged on the ground. Gold element profound energy? A disciple of the sword sect. The white-clothed woman gazed at Yang Yi and was slightly shocked. She'd clearly witnessed the entire process since Yang Yi attacked until the battle ended, and it was exactly because she'd witnessed it clearly that she was slightly shocked. Yang Yi was actually someone that possessed the gold element profound energy of legend, and he'd even shattered Bloodhand's blood shield. Even though that blood shield didn't even possess 3.5% of its usual strength, it wasn't something a profounder at the mortal realm could shatter. Yang Yi didn't answer the woman, and he said in a low voice, "That Bloodhand utilized a transmission talisman earlier, and his help is definitely rushing over right now. Can you still run?" The woman was stunned when she heard this, and then she shook her head and said, "No, that black blood seal was a type of forbidden technique amongst divine techniques. Presently, my cultivation has been sealed, and only by returning to the sword sect would I be able." "Forgive me," Yang Yi interrupted the woman, and then, under the astounded gaze of the white-clothed woman, Yang Yi carried the woman up into his arms before he dashed swiftly towards the distance. He didn't dare to leave the woman here, because he would be finished if the woman exposed him as Bloodhand's murderer after Bloodhand's help arrived. Even though this woman before him didn't seem like such a person, Yang Yi didn't dare bet on it. Of course, he could deal with the woman with a swift slash to the throat, but he was truly unable to do it. Only attack when attacked. This was Yang Ye's principle in conducting himself. If Bloodhand didn't make a move against him, then he would have just fled and not risk his life to kill Bloodhand. As for rescuing the woman, besides being worried that the woman would give him away, it was also because the woman was from the sword sect. Having one more friend was better than having one more enemy. Moreover, in his opinion, it made no difference whether he fled alone or fled with her. Less than an hour after Yang Yi left with the white-clothed woman, a bald middle-aged man appeared by Bloodhand's corpse. The bald man was over 40 years old, and his upper body was bare. His bare upper body and head were covered in tattoos of various strange symbols, and those symbols were actually wriggling slowly as if they were alive. It was extremely strange. The bald man sized up the surroundings before finally looking at Bloodhand's headless corpse at the side. As he gazed at Bloodhand's corpse, the bald man shook his head while a wisp of a heavy expression floated up onto his face. He said in a low voice, "Bloodhand said his opponent was inflicted by the black blood seal. Yet why has Bloodhand died a miserable death? Could it be that other experts of the sword sect appeared here?" When he spoke up to hear, the bald man walked over to Bloodhand's corpse, and he gazed at the holes on Bloodhand's chest. The bald man's gaze focused when he noticed one of those holes, and he said in a low voice, "3 holes made by a sword, and they ought to have been inflicted by Fairy Su. As for that tiny sword chi at the side, it was probably not executed by Fairy Su." As he gazed at the tiny hole, the bald man went silent for a moment before he said, "The sword chi is superficial, not condensed and messy. The person that executed this sword chi probably only possesses a strength at the first heaven realm." When he spoke up to hear, the bald man instantly came to an understanding. Bloodhand hadn't perished at Fairy Su's hands, and he ought to have been killed by a fellow at the first heaven realm who'd made a sudden appearance. When he thought up to hear, the bald man waved his right hand, and he tossed a transmission talisman into the air and said, "Bloodhand is dead. There's no need to rush over. Fairy Su had already been inflicted by the black blood seal, and she has completely lost her cultivation. This is an opportunity. Bloodbale and Bloodsickle, head to Snake Forest to block the way. All the others at the first heaven realm, stop everything you're doing for now and search Nether Wolf Gorge and Death Abyss. She must not be allowed to return alive to the sword sect, otherwise, my sect's plans will probably suffer some setbacks." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure flashed and transformed into a black shadow that flashed towards the distance. In the thick forest, Yang Yi carried the white-clothed woman on his back as he dashed swiftly like a madman. Even though the woman on his back was like a cushion of softness, Yang Yi couldn't be bothered to think about this as he was only thinking about how to survive now. He'd killed a member of the ghost sect, and he didn't believe that they would let him go. Moreover, based on Bloodhand's strength, his help would definitely not be trash at all. Even if Bloodhand's help was trash, that person would definitely not be someone he could go against. However, he didn't regret his actions because Bloodhand wanted to kill him, so why couldn't he kill Bloodhand? "I sense an expert searching for us." At this moment, the woman's voice sounded out from behind him. "You've recovered your strength?" Yang Yi was delighted in his heart. He'd carried the woman and fled because he was betting on the woman being able to recover her strength or if she had some help. After all, the sword sect was so close to here, and she ought to have already utilized some sort of secret technique to call for help. "No," the woman said indifferently. "The black blood seal is a divine technique, and it was executed by Bloodhand after paying an extremely high price. I'm utterly unable to recover without any external help. The reason I was able to sense this was because of my divine sense. Even though my strength had been sealed up, my divine sense is still working as normal. Xianxia's heart sank when he heard this, and then he said, "Have you called for help?" "No." "Why?" Xiangxia almost fell straight to the ground. He originally thought that she'd already called for help, so even though he was slightly anxious, it wasn't to the extent that he would be terrified. But now, my entire cultivation is sealed, so how would I execute a secret technique to notify the sword sect? When he heard this, Xianxia hurriedly said, "Use a transmission talisman. Didn't Bloodhand utilize one?" "I don't have one." Xianxia was speechless. He suddenly stopped moving, and then he flashed towards a different direction. When she noticed Xianxia was remaining silent, the woman said flatly, "Are you regretting taking me with you?" "Slightly," Xianxia replied honestly. "Put me down here and flee on your own. Perhaps you'll have a slight chance then." Xianxia was slightly tempted when he heard this, but he shook his head right after that. If she didn't die after he left her here, then with this woman's strength and status in the sword sect, it would be he who would die. Moreover, he didn't believe that the members of the ghost sect would let him go. After all, he'd killed someone from their sect that seemed to possess a high status. "They won't let me go. So, you'll suffer endless troubles if you bring me along with you." Xianxia laughed bitterly and said, "After I leave you here and they kill you, would they just forget it and not come looking for trouble with me?" The woman said, "Even though I don't know the exact cultivation of Bloodhand's help, it probably isn't too difficult for that person to perceive that Bloodhand hadn't died at my hand. Moreover, I've completely lost my cultivation, so it would be absolutely impossible for me to get so far. Perhaps they're already aware right now that someone brought me along and fled, and with the ruthless methods of the ghost sect, they wouldn't spare your life." "Exactly." Xianxia laughed bitterly and said, "Since they won't spare me, then bringing you along or leaving you behind makes no difference at all. Moreover, I feel slightly safer with you by my side." He was telling the truth. The woman's strength was something he'd witnessed with his own 2 eyes, and if she hadn't been careless, then how could he have had the chance to take advantage of the situation and finish Bloodhand off? Perhaps there might still be a chance to turn the situation around with such an expert by his side. But no matter what, he'd bet on her this time. The woman went silent for a short moment and said, "Why aren't you running towards Snake Forest and have changed directions instead? You ought to be clearly aware that we'll only have a chance at survival once we return to the sword sect. If you were Bloodhand's help, what would be the first thing you thought of?" The woman went silent. If she was Bloodhand's help, she would definitely stop the 2 of them on their path back to the sect. When she thought up to here, the woman lowered her head to glance at Xianxia, and her eyes revealed a wisp of praise. At such a young age, not only does he possess the gold element profound energy of legend, his strength and intelligence are extremely extraordinary as well. If the sword sect fosters him with all its might for a few years, then perhaps he'll be able to enter Southern Territory's ascension rankings. No one within the sword sect has entered the ascension rankings for a few decades. At this moment, Xianxia really wished he had the little fellow's ability. If he possessed the little fellow's speed, then would he even be afraid of the useless ghost sect's pursuit? After dashing madly for almost 4 hours, Xianxia was finally slightly exhausted, and he brought the white-clothed woman along to hide within a thick tree. As he gazed at the woman's exquisite and flawless face, Xiangxia's heartbeat betrayed him and sped up. He forcefully suppressed that sort of strange feeling in his heart and said in a low voice, "Continuing to run like this without any objective will get us nowhere. Once this goes on for long, we'll definitely be captured. Do you have any ideas?" "No." The woman's words were simple and direct. Xiangxia's face twitched, and he was almost angered to the point of spitting blood. He said, "Please, your strength is so formidable. Yet could it be that you don't have any thoughts or ideas?" The woman glanced indifferently at Xianxia and said, "Take me back to the sword sect, and then I'll bring others with me to annihilate them. That's all I can come up with." Xianxia was speechless, and he thought in his heart, "I want to bring you back to the sword sect as well. But is that even possible? There are definitely experts waiting on the way back to the Sword Sect, and we'll be giving our lives away by going there. You possess 5-element profound energy. Why haven't I heard of your name in the Sword Sect? The woman revealed a wisp of curiosity and interest from her eyes. I'm a labor disciple. Yang Yi had an energy stone in his hand and was absorbing the energy within it. And he answered casually when he heard the woman's question. A labor disciple? The woman's beautiful brows knit together as she said, how could that be possible? Even though your cultivation is low, your strength isn't low at all. Moreover, you possess gold element profound energy. How could you possibly be a labor disciple? Is it a huge glory to be a labor disciple? Do I have any reason to pretend to be one? Yang Yi spoke angrily, because at this moment, this woman before him actually had the mood to discuss these random questions with him. Could it be that she doesn't know there are one or even a few formidable fellows pursuing us? The woman went silent for a short while, and then she seemed to have thought of something. Her beautiful face turned cold as she said, if an outer court elder of the Sword Sect is trying to suppress your growth, then don't worry. If we're able to return, I'll personally investigate this matter. And no matter who it was, I'll absolutely not forgive anyone that dares to try and suppress a genius with potential. Yang Yi was shocked in his heart. This woman's status in the Sword Sect is absolutely not low. Right when he was about to ask about her background, the woman suddenly turned to look towards the distance before she said in a low voice, more than one First Heaven Realm experts are coming towards us, and they're from the Ghost Sect. Yang Yi swiftly stood up when he heard this, and he didn't hesitate at all to carry the woman on his back. After that, he leaped down from the tree and flashed towards the distance. As he ran madly, Yang Yi asked, if I have a transmission talisman, would you be able to utilize it to notify the experts of the Sword Sect? The woman was stunned, and then she said, yes. However, it has to at least be a mid-grade talisman. Do you have one? Not for now.